From the beginning, this story was about trust. Mi Loy trusted her childhood friend with everything she had. Jack trusted that he could fix it. Tien trusted that she belonged. And through it all, they learned something important. The money came back. 60% now, the rest later. The land deal went through. The engagement ring fit perfectly. Tien learned to make cakes that tasted just like Miloy's. She learned to ride a bicycle without falling. Everything was settling into place. But there was one more thing. One last surprise that would bring this family story to its perfect ending. And it started on a morning that felt like any other morning. 3 months after the engagement, Tien woke up feeling strange. Not sick, not exactly, just different. She sat at the edge of the bed, waited for the feeling to pass. It didn't. Jack was already up. She could hear him in the kitchen with Meloy, talking about the Nin Bin project, about wedding plans, about normal things. Tien stood up slowly. The room tilted slightly. She steadied herself against the wall. This had been happening for a few days now. The dizziness, the nausea in the mornings, the way certain smells made her stomach turn. At first, she'd thought it was stress, wedding planning, learning new recipes, trying to be the daughter-in-law Miloy deserved. But now she was starting to wonder if it was something else. She walked to the kitchen, tried to smile normally. "Good morning," she said. Miloy looked up from the stove. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine, just tired." But Meloy was already walking over, putting a hand on Tien's forehead, the way mothers do. "No fever," she said, "but you don't look fine. Really, The smell of the fish sauce hit her suddenly, strong, overwhelming. Tien's stomach lurched. She turned, rushed to the bathroom, made it just in time. When she came back out, pale and shaking, Miloy was waiting. Jack was standing too, worried. "Tien, what's wrong?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. I've been feeling like this for a few days. I thought it would pass." Miloy and Jack exchanged a look, a long look, the kind of look that said they were both thinking the same thing. "Tien," Meloy said gently. "When was your last period?" Tien opened her mouth to answer, then stopped, counted backward in her head. Once, twice, 3 times. Her hand went to her stomach. "Oh," she whispered. "How late are you?" Miloy asked. I don't know. I wasn't keeping track. With the engagement and the wedding planning and everything, She looked at Jack. His face had gone very still. "We should go to the doctor," he said, "right now." "It might not be right now," he repeated. But he was smiling, a small, careful smile, like he was afraid to hope too much. Miloy sat down heavily in a chair. She was smiling too, but her eyes were wet. "A baby," she whispered. "Maybe a baby." And just like that, everything changed again. They went to the clinic that morning, all 3 of them. Miloy insisted on coming. "This is family business," she said. "I should be there." They sat in the waiting room, Jack holding Tien's hand. Miloy sitting very straight, very still. Nobody talked much. What was there to say? Finally, they called Tien's name. The examination was quick, professional. The doctor asked questions, took a blood sample, told them to wait. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. When the doctor came back, she was smiling. "Congratulations," she said. "You're about 8 weeks pregnant." Tien started crying immediately. Jack just sat there, stunned, like someone had hit him over the head. A baby, he finally said. We're having a baby. Yes, the doctor said. Due in about 7 months. Early next year. Meloy stood up, walked over to Tien, hugged her tight. A grandchild, she whispered. I'm going to have a grandchild. They walked out of the clinic in a daze. The world looked different somehow. Brighter, fuller. Jack kept touching Tien's stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet, even though it was too early. A baby, he kept saying, like he couldn't quite believe it. Meloy was already planning. We'll need to prepare the back room, make it a nursery, and Tien, you need to eat more, rest more. Well, Mom, Jack said, laughing. Slow down. We have 7 months. 7 months goes fast, Meloy said. And she was right. But here's what made this moment even more meaningful. This baby. This new life. It was coming into a family that had been broken and had found its way back together. Into a family that had learned about trust, about patience, about love that shows up in small daily ways. And that made all the difference. Because this child would grow up knowing something important. That night, they sat together on the porch. The 3 of them. Soon to be 4. We should move up the wedding, Jack said, before Tien starts showing. Or, Meloy said, we wait until after the baby. Have the wedding when the baby can be part of it. Tien shook her head. I want to get married before the baby comes. She paused. I want to be your wife before I'm a mother. Does that make sense? Jack squeezed her hand. Yes, that makes perfect sense. So we'll plan it for next month, Meloy said. Small ceremony, just family, just us. And Tien added quietly. We should invite her. She's your oldest friend. Meloy looked surprised. After everything that happened, she made it right, Tien said. She paid you back. She helped Jack with the land. She kept your friendship. That matters. Meloy was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. You're right. We'll invite her. They sat in comfortable silence. Crickets singing, stars coming out, the air warm and still. I was thinking, Jack said, about names. If it's a girl, Meloy interrupted, you should name her whatever you want. This is your child, your choice. But I want your input, Mom. You're going to be her grandmother. Then I think, Meloy said slowly, that you should name her something that means new beginning, fresh start, something hopeful. Tien smiled. Mai, that's a hopeful name. Mai, Jack repeated. I like that. And if it's a boy? Meloy asked. They looked at each other, laughed. We'll figure that out when we get there, Jack said. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Wedding planning, doctor appointments, morning sickness that wasn't just in the mornings. Tien moved slower now, tired more easily. But she glowed. That's what everyone said. You're glowing. She didn't feel like she was glowing. She felt like she was constantly nauseous and couldn't fit into any of her clothes. But she was happy, happier than she'd ever been. And then the wedding day arrived. The wedding was small, simple, perfect. They held it in the garden behind the house. The same garden where Tien had built the compost bin, where she'd learned to grow vegetables, where she'd slowly, quietly become part of this family. Chairs borrowed from neighbors, flowers from the market, a simple white dress that Tien had bought for less than the bicycle cost. Nothing fancy, everything perfect. Thu arrived early, carrying flowers. She hugged Meloy for a long time. Thank you for inviting me, she said. I wasn't sure if you would. We're family, Meloy said. All of us. The past is past. Uncle Dung came too. Me Loy had invited him weeks ago, and he'd been helping with preparations, bringing things, fixing things, being helpful in the quiet way he had. He and Me Loy stood together, watching people arrive. They weren't holding hands, but they were standing close. Close enough. Tien got ready in the house. Me Loy helped her with the dress, with her hair. "You look beautiful," Me Loy said. "I look pregnant," Tien said, laughing. "You look like a bride, and like a mother, and like my daughter." Tien's eyes filled with tears. "Don't make me cry. My makeup will run." "Then I'll fix it," Me Loy said. "That's what mothers do." The ceremony was short. No priest, no elaborate vows. Just Jack and Tien standing in front of their small group of family and friends, promising to take care of each other, to build a life together, to be partners. When Jack said, "I do," his voice cracked. When Tien said, "I do," she was crying. They kissed, everyone clapped, and just like that, they were married. The celebration afterward was simple too. Food that Me Loy and Tien had made together. Cakes, of course, the kind that tasted like home. Tea, laughter. Uncle Dung gave a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, "and to family, the one you're born into and the one you choose." Everyone drank. Thu stood up next. "I want to say something," she said. Her voice was shaking. To Me Loy, and to Jack, and to Tien. The garden went quiet. "I made a mistake, a big one. I lost your money. I broke your trust, and I spent months not knowing how to fix it." She paused, wiped her eyes. "But you gave me a chance to make it right. You didn't punish me. You didn't cut me off. You worked with me to find a solution. And that," she took a breath, "that taught me something about forgiveness, about family, about what really matters." She raised her glass. "To Jack and Tien, may your marriage be built on the same grace that held this family together." Everyone drank again. And in that moment, under the trees in the garden, with the sun setting and the tea cooling and the cakes half eaten, everything felt complete. The money had come back. The trust had been rebuilt. The family had grown. Everything that had been broken was now whole. Later, after most of the guests had left, Me Loy found Jack and Tien sitting on the porch. The same porch where they'd had so many conversations, where they'd made so many plans. "How does it feel?" she asked. "To be married?" Jack smiled. "The same, but different." "Good different." Tien was resting her head on his shoulder, her hand on her belly, still flat, still just beginning. "Thank you," she said to Me Loy, "for everything, for teaching me, for accepting me, for..." She trailed off. Me Loy sat down beside them. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "You're my daughter now. This is what family does." They sat in comfortable silence. The garden looked beautiful in the twilight. Simple, peaceful. "I was thinking," Me Loy said, "about your father, Jack's father. How I wish he could be here to see this." Jack took her hand. "He would be proud," he said, "of all of us." "He would love Tien," Me Loy said. "He would love knowing there's a grandchild coming." She smiled, a bittersweet smile. "But he would also say that I worried too much about the money, about the future. He always said that as long as we had each other, we had enough." She looked at Jack, then at Tien, then at the garden, the house, the small, simple life they'd built. "He was right," she said softly. "We have enough. We have more than enough." The three of them sat together as the stars came out. Married, expecting, together, a family. The months that followed were busy. Tu Tien's belly grew, slowly at first, then all at once. They prepared the back room, painted it soft yellow, for either a boy or a girl, Jack said, assembled a crib, bought tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small. Meloy made blankets, knitted booties, told Tu Tien stories about when Jack was a baby. He was so serious, she said, even as an infant, always watching everything, figuring things out. He's still like that, Tu Tien said, laughing. Jack's Ninh Binh project broke ground. The land he had bought from Thu was perfect for worker housing. Everything was on schedule, on budget. Thu came to visit sometimes, bringing gifts for the baby, checking on Tu Tien, slowly rebuilding the friendship with Mi Loy that had been strained but never broken. The other land plots are starting to sell, she told them one day. The market is improving. I'll be able to pay back the rest of what I owe within the year. There's no rush, Mi Loy said. We're doing fine. And they were. The cake business was thriving. Mi Loy and Tu Tien went to market together most days. Sometimes Tu Tien went alone. The elderly ladies loved her. They'd nicknamed her Little Loy. You remind us of your mother-in-law when she was young, they said. Same kindness, same determination. Tu Tien would smile, touch her belly. Think about the baby growing inside. A baby who would grow up surrounded by love, by family, by the kind of stability that money can't buy. Uncle Dung proposed to Mi Loy on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Nothing fancy, just the two of them in the garden, him asking, her saying yes. We're too old for a big wedding, she said. We're not too old for happiness, he replied. They planned to marry after the baby came. Keep it simple. Just family. More love, more roots growing deeper. Tu Tien went into labor on a February morning, early, before dawn, the way all important things in this family seemed to happen. Jack drove her to the hospital. Mi Loy came too. Uncle Dung stayed home to mind the house. The labor was long, difficult, but not dangerous. Tu Tien was strong. She'd learned to be strong, learned from making cakes in the dark hours before market, from riding a bicycle when she was afraid of falling, from becoming part of a family that had every reason to be cautious but chose to love her anyway. She was strong enough for this too. The baby came as the sun was rising. A girl, small, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and her father's serious expression. Mai, Tu Tien whispered. Her name is Mai. New beginning, fresh start, hope. Jack held his daughter for the first time with tears running down his face. Mi Loy stood beside him, looking at her granddaughter, at the continuation of the family, at the proof that broken things can be mended and that trust, once rebuilt, is stronger than it was before. She's beautiful, Mi Loy said. She's perfect. She looks like Tu Tien, Jack said. She looks like all of us, Mi Loy replied. And she was right. Mai had Jack's seriousness and Tu Tien's gentle nature and something of Mi Loy's determination in the way she gripped her father's finger. She was all of them, the best of all of them. When they brought Mai home 3 days later, the whole house had been prepared. Flowers from Thu. A mobile Uncle Dong had carved by hand. Blankets and clothes and more tiny shoes than one baby could ever wear. The bicycle, still with its training wheels, leaned against the wall. We should take those off, Jack said, now that Tu Tien doesn't need them anymore. No, Tu Tien said. Leave them, Eve. For when Mai is old enough, we can teach her together. Mi Loy smiled. That night, they sat together in the nursery. 4 of them now. The family that had started with Mi Loy and Jack. That had grown to include Tu Tien, and now Mai. Jack held his daughter. Tien leaned against his shoulder. Meloy sat in the rocking chair, watching them all. I was thinking, Meloy said, about the money, about everything that happened with Thu, about how worried I was. And, Jack asked, and I'm glad it happened. They both looked at her, surprised. Not the losing it part, she clarified, but the rest. The working through it, the finding solutions, the learning to trust again. She looked at Mai, because if it hadn't happened, I might never have learned what I know now. What's that? Tien asked. That money comes and goes, but family, real family, stays. 3 months later, Mei Loi and Uncle Dung got married. Simple ceremony, same garden, same borrowed chairs. Mai was there, 3 months old, sleeping in Tien's arms. Jack gave his mother away, walked her down the short garden path to where Uncle Dung was waiting. Your father would approve, Mei Loi whispered to him. I know, Jack said. I approve too. After the ceremony, they ate cakes. Of course, cakes. The kind Mei Loi had taught Tien to make. The kind that would someday be passed down to Mai. Recipes and traditions and small daily rhythms that make a family what it is. Thu was there, smiling, at peace. The last of the land had sold. She'd paid back everything she owed. Plus interest she insisted on adding. We're even now, Mei Loi said. We're family now, Thu replied. That evening, as the celebration wound down, the whole family sat together. Mei Loi and Uncle Dung, Jack and Tien, baby Mai sleeping in her mother's arms, Thu sitting nearby. A family built not just by blood, but by choice, by forgiveness, by second chances, by small daily acts of love. The bicycle still leaned against the wall, training wheels and all. The garden was full of vegetables and herbs and the compost bin Tien had built. The kitchen smelled like sticky rice and mung beans and home. And in the nursery, a mobile turned slowly in the breeze, casting soft shadows on the walls. Everything that had been broken was whole. Everything that had been lost was found. Everything that had been worried over was at peace. This was family. This was enough. This was everything. Sometimes the story you think you're in isn't the story you're actually in. Mei Loi thought this was a story about money, about investment and return and financial security. But it wasn't. It was a story about trust, about the courage to love people even when they disappoint you, about building something stronger the second time around. It was a story about a son who paid attention to small things, about a woman who learned to belong, about a mother who learned to let go, about training wheels and sticky rice and gardens that grow slowly but surely, about family, the kind you're born into and the kind you choose, and the kind you build one small decision at a time. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share it with someone who needs to remember that broken things can be mended. Leave a comment telling us about your own family, the one you were born into or the one you chose. And subscribe so you don't miss the stories that remind us all what really matters. Because in the end, it's not about the money, it's about the love.